Hey y'all, welcome to this video. I'm so excited to film this. It is an idea that I got from one of you in the comments. Just the other day, Sydney posted this comment, video idea, if I were to make a makeup collection where you use the makeup you have to create a release. Maybe your release would have an eye palette, 2 lip colors, some cream cheeks, etc., etc. It would be extra cool if you renamed the stuff too in your they clearly don't have a poet on their staff kind of way. So I'm doing it. Sydney, thank you so much for the idea. I saw this comment and then I just immediately put it on the schedule. I decided to do it while the camera was still in the overhead position so that I could show you the product that I chose up close. And I've picked out names and everything. It's going to be really, really fun. If this is your first time to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Hannah. I love beautiful things. I talk a lot about makeup, but I try to delve into the stuff that I already own over and over again in various ways, in addition to looking at new stuff. I don't like to just only focus on what's new to the market. I'm into using what I have. So if that sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe. Now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. I'm wearing another set of nails by L'Oreal today. She sent me 2. I think I like these even better than the first pair. Make no mistake, I absolutely loved the first pair. But these, the tortoiseshell, the matte black, the gold flakes. Let's get into the makeup release that I came up with. And I will say that I kind of just did this off the top of my head. I was like, you know, daydreaming about it, and I just decided to go with what I came up with. So I'm not saying that this is absolutely for sure what I would do if I were releasing makeup. Like, you never know what all of the factors would be, but this is just an idea that I had. It's like I'm presenting to you one pitch for like a really beautiful, edited, specific release of a new makeup brand that I kind of dreamed up. My dream brand, or at least the version of it that I dreamed up this time, would release 2 things in the initial launch. And the first thing would be 4 single eyeshadows. So I am going to use things that I already own to describe to you my dream, but I am going off script a little bit. I'm doing like a little bit of a departure from what Sydney was actually imagining. I think that Sydney was saying like, pick a lipstick that you have and be like, this would be in my release, and another, like an eyeshadow palette that you have and be like, this would be in my release. I'm kind of doing that, but I'm also going to do a little bit of mixing and a little bit of tinkering. So I'm going to be like, you know, it would be like this, but in this format and maybe with a little bit of this mixed in. I'm doing the most, okay? We're just going to call what I'm doing the most rather than being ornery and picky. So I imagine releasing 4 single eyeshadows in their own compact. That's why I brought this out, this Rowan compact, because I really like this. I like that it's a single by itself. But for my brand, HLP Cosmetics, I didn't come up with a brand name before I sat down to film this, but I think that that just speaks to how much of a little seed of an idea this is. Like, I'm just kind of like taking you along with me. I'm not saying that I've envisioned like an actual brand. So for this little release that I'm telling you about that I think would be cool, they'd be magnetic. So you'd be able to pop them out. I like the idea of having a single shadow like this that you can buy, but you can pop it out really easily with a depotting tool or even just with a bobby pin or something and put it in a magnetic pan, because I really love my single eyeshadows. And I've been leaning more into the idea of pretty much mostly using single eyeshadows lately. And I feel like it would be easy to make packaging sustainable if you did it that way, because the outer packaging could all be like really sturdy cardboard. And then the pan itself could be a recyclable metal. And then you could either use the compact or you could just pop it out and use it as one of your singles. And the idea behind releasing 4 little singles would be that they would be 4 individual single shadow looks, like single all over the lid shadow looks. So you would only need to pick one and you could do a whole eye look with that one. So I've come up with 4 shades, all of which I feel like would be beautiful for putting all over the lid, but that I feel like kind of hang together as a release. Like I would like to see them all together in a range, and they could be used together in conjunction if you wanted to. And the other way that I've been thinking of this vision of a release of 4 single shadows that could be used individually or be used in magnetic palettes is that they would be kind of like a range of nudes. So the deepest one I imagine would be incredibly deep, not entirely black, but with a lot of black in it. So it could be used as a deepening shade, but it would also be a really, really deep, shimmery, all over the lid, nearly nude color on even the deepest of skin tones. And my idea for that, this is what I'm thinking of as like the first shadow in the range. My idea for that is that it would look a lot like Victoria Beckham Onyx, but it would maybe be like a little bit mixed in with some just a little bit lighter color that's like a blackish brown, like a blackish bronze kind of. And I don't think that they would exactly be creams, like maybe not quite as creamy as the Rowan quads, maybe not as creamy as the Victoria Beckham, because I wouldn't want it to be something that never entirely set on the eyes. And I also wouldn't want it to be something that had to be stored in a little container like this with a lid that had to be airtight. I would want it to be like an actual shadow that you could throw in a magnetic pan that's pretty sturdy. So it would lean more in the direction of being an eyeshadow rather than a cream shadow. But I would want the formula to be very, very creamy, kind of like the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights formula. So they're not wet, these shades, but when you touch them, they feel really kind of flaky and creamy and super textured. And you can even see the texture on the surface of the pans. So for all 4 of these shades, just imagine that that's the kind of formula I'm talking about. But I feel like that kind of formula would really lend itself to having like a rich, deep, shimmery black like this that's mixed in with specks of rich, deep, shimmery bronze. Okay, so let's mix the color that I'm talking about. Let's like try to create it. So really I'm thinking that most of it would be black, like it would really be a black, this color. It would really be a lot like Onyx. And so that's like the majority of it. But to keep it from ever going gray at all, like ever going gray or ever going blue, I would want it to have some brown in it. I feel like the silver reflects are making it kind of more gray than I'm imagining. I kind of want it to be more black. Okay, there we go. So it's kind of like a brindled cat kind of in the pan. And then when you swatch it out, it is like a charcoal, like a really shiny charcoal that could be smoked out all over the lids. And speaking of brindled cats, Sadie scratched me right here on my wrist the other day. So there's the first color, and I would call this Muddy Dusk. Hopefully you can see close up that it does have multicolored specks in it. The shine, it's got some of that bronze in there and some of the silver reflect, and it looks very, very wet. Those are all qualities that I would want in a shade like this. It almost looks a little bit multicolored because of what I've mixed with it. I'm sure that's coming from the Rowan shade. And maybe if I were actually creating a shade like this, I would lean into having the reflects be even more multicolored. But as a basic representation of what I would do, this I think is excellent for my first shade. Gosh, I really made a mess here. So I think that if I were really going to do what Sydney was asking and just pick things from what I already own, like rather than mixing, I think probably Victoria Beckham Onyx is the closest to what I'm envisioning when I think about this shade, Muddy Dusk, this dream shade from my dream little release. This is the closest, but I'm glad that I mixed a couple other things with it just to make it a little bit more dimensional, a little bit more something something. So the next shade in the range would be a little bit lighter, but still a really, really deep, kind of muddy, yucky, claggy, ruddy shade. I would call it Ruddy Umber, and it will basically be what Tom Ford Naked Bronze is for me and what this shade from the Jaclyn Hill Morphe palette is for me. This really, really kind of warm leaning, but still quite deep. Naked Bronze has a really similar vibe going, and so do some of these Rowan shades, especially the one that up here on top that I mixed in with the Victoria Beckham for the first shade. That one's called Nikki Dust. It has so much shine in it that I think it has the potential to kind of like change the color quite a lot. But maybe if I put it down first as a base and then layer the other two on top, we'll kind of get to what I'm talking about. So there's Nikki Dust. But I'm talking about shades that wouldn't be quite as sheer as this. So it's almost like if Nikki Dust had way more pigment. So there's Naked Bronze on top of it, and then I'm going in with the finger that has the Jaclyn Hill shade on it. Yeah, it's really getting to be more like it. So something like that for Ruddy Umber. And possibly there would be some more specks of texture in it, you know, again, like thinking about the way that these shadows feel, the Jungle Light palette shadows feel and look, like the texture of them, the flakes are so apparent and it makes them really, really shiny. And you see that looks very smooth because it's got like that cream mixed in with it. So this is like the color that I'm thinking of, but I imagine that would be really textured like this and have some chunky bits of shine mixed in like this does. Maybe I don't think I would want it to lean too gold though. That kind of makes it kind of gold. If I put any reflex in it, I would still want them to retain this kind of like bronzy, mucky sensibility about them. Okay, onward. So in my mind, the third shade would be kind of like just a little bit of a step lighter from this one, and maybe with a little bit less of that reddish undertone, just a little bit less. But we are kind of trying to create something that's kind of like 4 shades of deep neutral, like deep grungy neutral. So the next one I imagine calling Tawny Grease. And I feel like this shade from the Rowan Quad is a pretty good inspiration for it. You can see it's really similar to what's already there, but without that red undertone. And also this from the Natasha Denona Gold palette. So we're kind of talking about a slightly browner, slightly more taupe, just slightly lighter bronze. And very wet look, as I hope they all would be. Tawny Grease. And then the last one is like the logical next step. I'm actually going to leave these on my finger because I feel like I might want to mix them in a little bit. The next one is kind of the logical next step, but I don't want it to be like super light because I actually find that even as someone with the palest of skin, a very light shade like this all over the lids, like a shade like this, is not flattering. And it might be because of my hooded eyes, but it just makes my lids kind of collapse in on themselves. My eyes kind of look smaller. I need something. I need some depth, some color. So I'd want Tawny Grease to be the lightest of all of them, but I would still want it to have some, like to really register on the eyes, like to be something that would deepen the crease. So I'm using this shade, which is Tinker Time by Colourpop. I like it because it has little micro glitters in it. So it's not like a super textured looking shiny shade, but then when you buff it out, it really has that look of something wet. I really like that. And it is pretty close to what I would use for this 4th shade, which I imagine naming Grubby Biscuit. And I like the idea of Grubby Biscuit not having too much dimension in terms of like other colors or other like flecks in it, just enough of that micro shimmer to make it really, really shine. But I kind of like the idea of like a washy dishwater gray, but it's like a dishwater gray that again is deep enough to register on my eyes. And then a shade like this, hopefully it would be deep enough too that many people with different skin tones could use it all over the lid and it wouldn't be ashy. That's another reason that I wouldn't want it to get too light or to like get too into actual beige territory. I would still want it to stay taupe. So that's Grubby Biscuit, or at least as close an approximation as I can get using what I have. And you know, if I were actually doing this, if I had the opportunity to actually do this, I would tinker with them a little bit. Like I imagine continuing to tinker with Muddy Dusk until it really felt muddier and maybe even like a little bit browner. I really like the undertone of this, but I think that the fact that there's so much silver reflect in it is making it lean more gray, whereas I would kind of want it to lean warm. I would want it to be like this deep blackish brown or like brackish color that had a also dark reflect. So the shine would be like a micro shimmer that was also dark or, you know, brown or black and at the very least bronze, you know? So that's the way in which this is slightly off of what I imagine. And I don't know, I might want to take this one back a little bit from being as orange as it's looking, Tawny Grease, and make it just a little bit more neutral. Those are like a couple of little fixes that I would do if I could, but these are pretty good approximations using what I have. So we have Muddy Dusk, Ruddy Umber, Tawny Grease, and Grubby Biscuit. And I also imagine that they would be square because I really love square shadows. I really like being able to put them into magnetic palettes and have there be no space between them. So I imagine that they would be similar to Natasha Denona shades, but entirely square rather than being slightly rectangular, which these are. Okay, I'm going to leave these swatches on my arm and tell you about the 4 other products that I imagine that I would release. And I'm going to swatch them on my other arm. I'm going to mix them and swatch them on my other arm. I'm sure that there will be mixing. So I told you a bit about the formula that I envisioned for these 4 singles. And I'm envisioning another formula for the other product. And that formula is entirely inspired by the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek Palette. In fact, if I were working with a lab or something, I would basically just send them to this to them, and I would be like, just dupe this formula, and that's the formula that I want. It's like the best because it actually does work for the lips and the cheeks. Like it really does. It's not something that works for the cheeks but is too dry for the lips, or that works for the lips but is too emollient for the cheeks, which is what it is for almost every other lip and cheek product I've ever used. Every multi-stick I find is better for one than the other. These, I find them beautiful. They work beautifully for the lips and the cheeks, and that is what I would be after. And I imagine the same thing, right? I would like to release 4 colors, but have them be in individual compacts, and have the compacts be 100% like recyclable cardboard or something biodegradable, and have the little metal pans also be something recyclable, and have it be so that you could easily pop them out and use them in a magnetic palette. So that's one option. The other option would be to release a palette of 4 like this and have the big palette be, again, the same biodegradable material, and then, you know, you'd be able to pop them out. I think it would just depend on whether, if in developing the colors, they ended up being colors that I felt really confident would work for everyone, or whether I wanted to present them in such a way where people could pick and choose the ones that would work best for their needs or best for their skin tone. So in addition to being inspired formula-wise by the e.l.f. Active Workout Ready Lip and Cheek Palette, I'm inspired color-wise, but I do want to express that I would make some alterations to the shades here, and I do have names for the shades. So in this, like if I were doing exactly what Sydney said, if I were just picking stuff I already have and being like, this would be part of my release, this is what I would pick. I would be like, I would proudly release the e.l.f. Active Lip and Cheek Ready, whatever the butt it's called, Lip and Cheek Palette as my own. You know what I mean? I'd be like, I made this and you should use it because I think it's great. But if I were actually doing it, right? If I were actually coming up with all of the shades, here's what I would do. And this is kind of like, this is part of why I feel like I would maybe release them as 4 separate ones rather than a palette. Like my first instinct was to be like, oh, a little palette like this. But I want to mix a shade that is like really, really light because I would want that for myself. And it's something that I have a really, really hard time finding. And I feel like if I were making makeup, I would want to make something that is hard for me to find. And I have a hard time finding really light and then also really kind of neutral leaning, kind of like dirty, almost like gray, like grayish cheeks. So I've put Maybelline Beige Babe, and then this is Lisa Eldridge Velvet Fawn. Although I don't know. And I'm gonna mix the e.l.f. with that. But I feel like still it's too dark. Like this is not what I was imagining. What can I mix this with to make it lighter? Okay, so it's starting to get lighter, but I feel like it's still kind of pink. Like I want it to get lighter, but I want it to stay grungy or get grungy or something. I'm actually gonna put, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put in a little bit of Naked Bronze and just see what happens. And quite a bit more of the concealer. Yeah, okay, we've gotten grungy. We've gotten a little more mauve, perhaps. Yeah, let's go with that. It's like slightly deathly, you know what I mean? It's like a slightly, it's just like a little bit like faded, you know? Yeah. Yeah, and see, I wouldn't want to release a palette with this color in it. I wouldn't want to be like, this is for everyone and have this color in it, especially as a lip and cheek palette, you know what I mean? So yeah, let's say that these are going to also be the same thing, like singles, but in theory you could buy all four and put all four into a magnetic palette by popping them out of their pans. And they will be creams like this. Okay, I basically injured myself by scraping my depotting tool across the back of my hand. But you know, it's fine. We do it for art. So yeah, let's go to the next shade. So this next shade is pretty much perfect to me, the shade that's already in here. I absolutely love it the way that it is. But for fun, let's say that we would want to mix it. Oh, I forgot to tell you about the name for the first one. I would call this Sooty Putty because, you know, it's like Silly Putty. It basically is the color of Silly Putty. It's like Silly Putty, but it's kind of sooty, you know, or I would make sure that it was kind of sooty. So I do think that this is really beautiful. I do like the idea of making it just a touch less warm, just a touch. So let's see what it looks like if we mix in a little bit of Gone Greige. Just making it a little bit dirtier, you know? I think that that's pretty much it. Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I would call this shade of Cream and Cheek Blousey Bronze. Blousey is a very descriptive colloquial word that I think it means slatternly. It basically means you're a hot mess. Blousey Bronze. Okay, and I do quite like this third shade in here, but I do want to mess with it a little bit. I would call my third shade Burnt Fruit, and I want this to just be a little bit more burnt. So I'm gonna put in, yeah, actually I would want it to be a little bit more like this. So this right here is Mink, it's Revlon Mink, and you can see that it's just a little bit more neutral than the shade from the Maybelline palette or the e.l.f. palette. And you know, without even mixing, I think we could just go ahead and say that this one, Mink, represents pretty much what I want for the third shade, Burnt Fruit. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly it. The magnetic lid of Velvet Fawn is wreaking all sorts of havoc over here. Should we put just a touch of the original in, just to say we did? Yeah, there we go. Burnt fruit. Okay, and I'm sorry if this is kind of an anticlimactic finale, but I feel like the highlighter from this palette is already perfect. I wouldn't want to mess with it. It's what would go into my palette, as you can probably tell from the fact that I have all this pan on it. I love it. It doesn't swatch very well because it's like the way its real glory is when it's buffed out to be completely sheer. And so it's hard to like, because it's like this thick cream, it's hard to get it to show. Maybe no, I just don't think I'm really doing it. It's hard to get you to be able to see how amazing it looks on the cheeks because I'm getting like too thick of a swatch, and because it's thick, the slight pigment in it is kind of layering on itself and not allowing it to shine. But this is what I would want in a palette like this. I would want a highlighter that, when buffed out and mixed with the blushes, becomes completely sheer. Like it really will just gleam and be a gloss on any skin tone, and that you can mix with any of the blushes and it will just make it glossier and more sheer rather than changing the color, like rather than lightening it up and changing the color. And I feel like this is that, but you know, if I were releasing product, obviously I would test it on a whole bunch of different models, whole bunch of different skin tones, and make sure that it's something that would work for everyone. Because if I was releasing these 4 products as 4 individuals, you know, obviously only one of them is a highlighter, so I would want it to be truly universal. If I couldn't get it to be universal, I would like add another one that would work for deeper skin. But my hope is that I could get a formula or develop a formula that would work for everyone the way that this works for me. And I would call the highlighter Glossy Mousey. And I kind of like that mousy and blousey rhyme. So we have Sooty Putty, Blousey Bronze, Burnt Fruit, and Glossy Mousey. And there's, you know, one of the words in this one rhymes with one of the words in that one. I'm here for it. Okay, so here we go. Here's what I thought of just off the top of my head when I saw Sydney's comment. If I waited another month and did this again, I would probably have like a whole different set of answers and a whole different vision. But this is what I'm into right now. I'm into the idea of like a nude eye for everyone, like an eyeshadow, a range of nude eyeshadows, but they're not nude. Oh gosh, look at this. They're not nude in that they are the exact color of your skin. They're nude in that they are very, very deep, like they deepen your eye, or they just add a little bit of texture and a little bit of a dimension on your eye. I would want to have like this range of colors that could add that kind of like soggy, sultry, dishwater, murky depth to the eye for anyone. And then the lip and cheek products are, you know, similarly like a soggy, murky dishwater, three versions of like a soggy, murky dishwater color for the lips and the cheeks. And then one highlighter that could be mixed with any of those to make it more glossy either on the lips or the cheeks. And the idea would be that you could go really minimal with this, right? You could just pick one, like you could buy Tawny Grease, or no, that's Tawny Grease. You could buy Ruddy Umber, and you could buy Burnt Fruit, and then that would be it. You could do a gorgeous look all over your eye, this color all over your eyes, and this color all over your lips and cheeks, and that would be it. Or you could go for the full spectrum, right? You could get all 4 of these and put them together in a little square palette, just the 4 of them. And you could put all of these together in a little square palette, just the 4 of them, or just get 2 or just get 3 or something. And I don't know, I feel like it would be cool if the eyeshadows were sized such that 4 of them made the same size as one of these. So you could get like 1 pan of the cheek product, and then you could get 2 pans of the eyeshadows, and they would like make a perfect rectangle. Like that would be cool. Although I know that some people don't like putting creams and shadows together in the same palette, but I like to think that the shadows would be creamy enough and the creams would be dense enough that it wouldn't feel all that transgressive. So this was really fun, but before leaving you, I wanted to bring the stuff that I used back onto the screen and just make the point that I already have everything that I need to make these products or make the looks that I'm imagining I would make with these products I'm imagining I would release. I already have them, right? I did have to do some mixing, some blending, and it was a little messy, but we don't need somebody to create this makeup, right? Like we don't need me to release HLP Cosmetics. We don't need to wait for somebody to come out with this pale of a cream cheek, because you can mix your lipsticks and your concealers and your highlighters and your blushes that you already have together to get your perfect color. It's something that we don't talk enough about on YouTube, because so much is just about waiting for the perfect thing to come out so you can buy it in its pristine shape and just use it exactly as it was released forever. We're not really encouraged to be little artists, to be our own mixologists in this way. So if this looks beautiful to you, don't just pine away and wish that some makeup company would hire me to design their collections. Instead, go to the makeup that you already have and see what you can do to create your perfect stuff. Because I bet if you're mixing it yourself, there would be slight differences even between what I dreamt up and what you actually want for yourself. And if you do that, let me know how it went in the comment section down below. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you guys. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that it was fun, and don't forget to take extra good care of yourself today, because that's what'll make you the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.